everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sabbath on the Land. I'm Pastor Abby, and today I'm in the Koons Preserve here in Southbury and joined by my good friend Tony. Tony, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Tony Lorenzen. I am the minister at the Mattatuck Unitarian Universalist Society, currently meeting in Southbury, but building our own church building in Woodbury presently. I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being out with me today.
Thanks for asking me to do this. This is awesome.
Oh, it's so fun. And we are in a beautiful little spot tucked in by some flowing water and lots of greenery, and also a road that's not too far away. So hopefully it'll stay quiet as we chat about faith and spirituality and Sabbath and the earth and kind of bringing those things together. And so since we're out here, what is your favorite place to be in nature, Tony?
My favorite place to be in nature is near the ocean. My mom's family immigrated to the United States, the New Bedford, Massachusetts area from the Azores Islands.
Oh.
And so they were all part of that Portuguese immigrant community. And eventually my grandparents bought a house in a rather historic neighborhood in Mattatuck, Massachusetts, which was their house literally 1,000 yards from the ocean.
Oh my gosh.
You know,
gorgeous.
1,000 yards down the street, a football field away is the town dock, and then down the street from that, the town beach, and around the other way, the town YMCA. So as a child, I grew up all summers going to my grandparents' house. Grew up with a single working class mom, and till I was in high school, I thought vacation meant you went somewhere to visit relatives.
Still does very often.
That's how we afforded to do it. But that was always at my grandmother's and grandfather's place on the water. So anything related to being near the ocean is automatically a transportive experience for me. Seagulls, the smell of salt in the air. For me, boxwoods of all things. My grandmother had boxwoods in front of her house. Kind of nondescript plant, not the world's most favorite thing everybody dreams to have on their property or whatever, but just one of those things. To me, I smell a boxwood, I automatically smell salt air, even if I'm like in the middle of a continent far away from an ocean, because it has such a sensory association. So anywhere near the ocean is my real happy place, just in terms of being out with the land. Although I will say that recently, in the last couple of years, and you know this as being a dog person yourself, I never had a pet. Had horrible pet allergies as a kid. Didn't have a pet till I met my now wife a few years back, and she had just kind of adopted a dog from a friend of hers. And so I came into the picture not too long after the dog, so I adopted the dog. And I love the dog so much. Now I understand all the things that I was stopped by, my sinuses from experiencing for so many decades. But now walking through the woods with her, whether it's Hollow Park in Woodbury or Three Rivers or wherever we're in town, we live in Woodbury, she just loves it, and she loves going in the water, in the river, and like anywhere watching her enjoy the world is great, because it also reminds me to enjoy the world.
Yeah.
This is important. What's on your screen? No, keep watching, really, but what's on your screen isn't the real important thing. When you're done with this, go out and actually be with the tree.
Yeah, that real smelling the salt air presence and really being all there.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And we are coming up on beach season, so you're in luck. You hopefully get to steal some time away at the ocean.
Oh, I'm sure I will.
Oh, good.
Always do somehow.
And you mentioned that being by the ocean has this almost restful, you associate that with your vacations as a child. And so how do you understand this relationship between faith and spirituality, earth and natural creation, and then Sabbath, or restful, reconnective time?
Oh boy, so many things get thrown together in this for me, and I think for lots of people. For me, first of all, I think it starts with a sense of having been someone who grew up Catholic, that there's a Catholic sense that's a little different from the Protestant sense I walked into as an adult, of really being sensory and embodied. Now, sometimes not always in a good way. We can go into all kinds of other podcasts about what might not be appropriate about the Catholic Church and their theology, but there was also a very sacramental theology to it, which wasn't just 7 sacraments and ceremonies. It was, you encounter God in the people, places, and events of your life all the time, you know. Elizabeth Barrett Browning's poem about every common bush being a fire with God, right?
Yes,
and the one who sees takes off their shoes on holy ground. Everybody else just picks the blackberries off of it, right?
I love that poem.
And so I kind of grew up with that sense that God is everything and in everything. I think my Catholic catechism teachers were a little more panentheistic than the Vatican probably intended them to be, but it worked out that way. And for the benefit, I think, you know, that kind of relationship where what's divine and all-powerful and transcendent about God is embedded into the very existence of all of this all the time. And we tend to miss it, that idea that God is always present, and when something wild happens, we get a big awakening, we think like, oh, there's God, and God's going, been here all the time, like, you know, turn around.
Pay attention.
Pay attention. Never been gone, always right here. And so I've always kind of had that sense of that, and I was lucky to have a father who was a painter. A guy who went to college to be a gym coach and football coach, right? And had to take an art class and found out he could draw and paint.
Wow.
So then became an art teacher and a football coach. And then eventually a college professor and a painter. And he would take us out when he would do classes and things with his students as his children. And I'd be drawing my thing and doing my painting. And he was like, why'd you make the leaf green? Dad, all the leaves are green. And he'd be like, take my head and look up through, are they? And I'd be like, oh, that one's kind of yellow. All right, that's almost black. All right, fine, they're not all green, you know, to your parents, right? But I grew up with that kind of awareness, not necessarily intentionally about God, but it works out that way anyway for me, you know? And I'm very grateful for that, because that's the kind of connection I've always had to being able to pick up how people are able to see God in creation. So how can you do anything else?
Yeah.
You know, it's, you know, the Hebrew scriptures especially are full of this, like all over the place. People are paying attention to the world around them in minute detail. You can't read the Psalms without seeing like some reference to everything we're looking at here: trees, branches, leaves, dirt, water, running streams, you know, whatever.
Right.
So I think that's something we've become disassociated from.
Yeah.
You know, over the centuries, we've let this, and I think sadly, in misinterpretations of those scriptures about, you know, be in control of nature and have your command over the earth. Like, never was that. It was always about living in harmony with that.
Much more mutuality.
Yeah, you know, so I think there's an awareness now that there's either a return to that or everybody perishes. And that's a good thing. It can be scary, but it's a good thing. People are finally, I think, becoming a little more aware of that. And what we learn all the time is just the wonder of creation that we're blind to until very recently. Now we know that the trees all talk to each other, and they use like conduits of like fungi to do this, and they're all like everything's together. Everybody's working together, and it makes all the separateness and apartness and conflict and everything we see in our human world like, oh, we really got it messed up.
Yeah.
This is really not good. This is the way to do this, you know? And I hope that we can collectively get on a better path before it's ultimately too late, because this is everything. I recently looked at a couple of essays, and I think it was the Harvard Divinity School Bulletin, although it might have been Yale Divinity Bulletin. Could we get both in our house?
Yale and Harvard, oh boy.
But it was a lot of stuff on environmental theology. And one of these essays was from a guy from Connecticut, I believe, from the Gaianism community, that kind of literally takes a worship of the earth as their thing. And I will say a bit of it seemed a little bit of, you know, the kind of environmental zealotry, like zealotry of any kind, you know, generally humorless, can fall into purity culture. It's a little, but there was something he said about that community's practice that grabbed a hold of me and has fundamentally changed my own personal daily prayer practice over the last 4 months.
Yeah.
And I read this preparing for our Earth Day service in April. So this was maybe in March I started poking through this, and it was that their community recommends meditating every day, but outside, always outside. So having reached that point in life where old sports injuries have caught up with me and the aging process is going, by the way, don't get out of bed fast anymore. Started having a lot of lower back issues, so I actually took up yoga seriously for the first time in my life, other than just poking around with it now and then, back in February. And it really made a huge difference. It has rehabilitated most of what was going on with me. And when I read this article, I'm like, all right, it's a little cold, but I'm gonna put on a hoodie and I'm gonna take the yoga mat outside. And virtually every day it's been legitimately warm enough to not freeze out there while I was doing it. I've been taking the yoga mat outside. And it's one of those things I think that always happens with your prayer, that God will go, see, gotcha.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is fantastic. Have gone from feeling not just connected to the natural world, but really breathing with it. There's this real sense of intimate connection, of feeling the flow of the energy, the life, the whatever's going on. All of a sudden, just even the breath of God, that Holy Spirit embodiment, just seems tangible. I'm like, this is wild. I should have been doing this the rest of my life. You know? Where has this been? This is such a great idea. And not that it's that novel or people haven't done this forever, but when it hits you, when you personally discover something, right? Becomes a whole revelation of God to you. And I've really been benefiting that incredibly for the last couple of months. Cannot believe I have not done this as a practice before. This is so wonderful. So there's that intense connection of, if you go out and have a relationship with the world, it's going to change you too and invite you into other things. So I've been experiencing that, which I've been very grateful for.
That's wonderful. And what a neat way of tying together a practice like yoga with the sense of being present in the natural creation that you're an equal member of. Do you have other practices that help you kind of recenter or rest when you're kind of observing Sabbath or reconnecting?
Yeah, I play guitar, and I think playing the guitar is an incredible spiritual practice for any musician. You're singing. My wife's a singer, was a professional singer before she went into the ministry.
Wow.
So music is a prayer for real in our house. When I was serving a church in Texas, I met a woman who was a folk singer at a pub. Went out with some friends who are also clergy. We were at this pub, and this woman was singing and playing, and all the songs just seemed really great, and they were about, you know, taking care of each other or the world or some justice issue. I'm like, I gotta meet this person. Who is this person? And she comes over to our table and says, the way you guys are so into the different songs, I figure I gotta be your friends. So her name was Shelley Colley, and she just has this sense of embodiment in place in Texas that she puts into all her stuff. And I just got that sense of, when you play, you get connected to not only the world, but the people, the relationships. And you get a little more in tune to the music of the world. And here it is music. What was that movie that was a while back? God, probably 20 years ago. August Rush.
Oh, yes.
Where the kid is trying to sense in the wind and the grass and, you know, the music he can hear, and doesn't even know his parents are musicians. Right? And I think that's that music in the world we all hear and we get taught by culture to not pay attention to.
Yeah, I can't help but kind of tie this to your dad being an artist as well, and the use of art as a way of looking again and looking closer at the things that we have been taught to just move past quickly, get on to the next thing. That you share in that kind of artistry of look again, look closer. Maybe if it's music, like listen again, listen closer, or feel closer. That's really profound.
It makes, I think, the human experience so much more of a totality. That we're never meant to be this binary, separated, you know, flesh and spirit, mind. You know, everything's connected together. And the more we learn about that, the more we learn it's true at very molecular levels.
Yeah.
Trauma gets embedded in your genes
Yeah.
and stuff like this. So experiencing everything more holistically, not only I think deepens the enjoyment or the understanding of just about anything, but it also makes everything connected far beyond, say, the concert hall or the instrument or the person you're talking to, and it branches out to everything very quickly.
Yeah.
And I think helps us regain that sense that I'm pretty sure humans had an easier time of accessing once upon a time than we might now, of moving through the world, not feeling so apart from it.
Yeah. Speaking of connection, and you used the word justice earlier, how is this conversation about environment and climate justice spoken about or important in your faith context?
Very much so. Going back to the 1960s and 70s, the Unitarian Universalist Association has had a lot of national statements come out of its annual General Assembly, voted on by the whole denomination, things like that. And the Unitarian Universalist Association is up at the front of anybody being concerned with climate justice. Frequently, some of the big activists are Unitarian Universalists in your local community. And we have an educational program for congregations called Green Sanctuary, which is a multi-year process of education and training and community relationship building to make your congregation and all its practices as sustainable as is possible. And this has been going on for about 20 years when you got Green Sanctuary certification for recycling. Now you need an LED building. You gotta really,
Stakes are higher.
right? You gotta be lowering your carbon footprint. You gotta do offsets. There's all kinds of stuff you gotta do to do it now. But that's good. Lots of congregations are exploring ways to be solar powered. My community's looking into ways of how do we step by step build this so we might start on the grid, but we'll eventually take it off with the solar paneling and thermal heating and cooling instead of trying to tap the grid so much. So we even had an argument in our congregation when we bought land here locally that it was environmentally not the best practice of sustainability to buy land and build a building. We should have just used something that was already in existence. We had somebody leave the community.
Wow.
Because we can get some real hardcore environmentalists. And I've met some incredible UUs. I have a friend who's at UConn, who will be retiring soon, who was actually a member of a congregation I served years ago in Texas. And rain barrels, flushing the toilet with water from the rain barrel. I mean, much more than I've got myself up to yet. But admire.
Yeah.
This is the way it's got to increasingly go. We've tried to start getting rid of more and more plastics just from our life at home. And Tuesday's really good at this, and I keep missing some stuff. And it's hard. Getting rid of plastics is hard. Boy, that's a wake-up call of how infused into everything plastic has become. But all this stuff is always present with our groups. There are always actions going on. There's only 1,100-ish or so of our congregations and maybe 2,000 Unitarian Universalist clergy in the world.
Wow.
And, something like the White Sands thing and or the pipeline. There were a bunch of us there. I mean, in proportion to us, that was a hefty group of people, and we're always doing stuff like that. So it's always right up front. We had an educational thing about Passover because we have all kinds of different backgrounds in our congregations this spring at Passover time. So instead of printing out a whole bunch of copies of the Haggadah, they just put it all on screen. So you have to print it and things like that. So it's always coming up, I serve another congregation in Meriden. They use no disposable stuff coffee hours.
Wow.
All real coffee cups, real silverware, wash dishes, all the time, no throwaways.
Wow.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So it's upfront and conscious all the time. There's a good number, not so much in my two congregations, although there are some, but we have a lot of people who are really into a more neo-pagan spirituality, a real earth-centered, a Gaianism of their own kind of imagining. And I think that's great. And I think that's also gotten divorced from so many traditions over the years. You know, it's Michael Fox's whole original blessing, you know. The earth and the flesh aren't bad, and God said it was good. It's always been good. All these people are saying everything's bad and you're in charge of the earth and not symbiotic with it. Bad. Those are the wrong people. Why we listen to them?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, it sounds like a real tenet and like central principle to the Unitarian Universalist
It is.
Church.
Of the 7 principles of the Unitarian Universalist Association, the 7th one is a respect for the inherent, a respect for the interconnected web of existence of which we are all a part. And the 6th source of the 6 spiritual sources is earth-centered traditions. So it's
written right there.
It's
it
written
really
right
is.
into there.
Yeah.
It's part of the base of the community. So
Yeah.
And my experience as a Unitarian Universalist minister near 20 years is we have a lot of people who are formerly or still connect somehow to Judaism. We have a lot of former Catholics in this part of the country and a lot of former evangelicals in the South where I've been before. And we have a lot of people who seem to, in my experience, combine like the best of their Christian background and the justice of Jesus with the connection to the earth of the earth-centered traditions. I even have a couple clergy friends who consider themselves, you know, Christian witches. You know, I'm a Jesus follower and I'm an earth princess, you know, at the same time. You know, and I think it's that kind of integration that's always been part of this tradition. Not always easy, but it's like our congregation's more like a microcosm of the whole society. You're all gonna have to learn to do this together or we're all in trouble, so you might as well figure it out here.
Wow, what a diverse group, but also then what a rich group of perspective and passion and motivation to come together with. That's also something I celebrate about this series, this Sabbath on the Land, is the opportunity talking about interconnected community, to hear from so many people of so many different backgrounds like yourself about this understanding between spirituality and earth and Sabbath and really tying it together, but being able to listen to one another and, as we said in the very beginning, be physically present, really here in the midst of our own backyard creation. So.
And just taking advantage of your ability to connect to the world is an act of resistance, right? That's Walter Brueggemann's Sabbath is resistance. The world wants you to work all the time, work yourself to the bone, do everything you can to help somebody else make profit. And leisure and experiencing hiking and meditating on the mountain, that's for us who have all the means and the privilege. Well, no, that's a lie. I mean, from the get-go, it was, you're not going to do anything on the 7th day. Here you are.
Yeah.
You know, Sabbath really is resistance, and Sabbath in the world is the epitome of that, I think.
Sabbath as resistance. Love that. Thank you so much for
You're
joining me
welcome.
today. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you.
It was great to be asked to do this. That was great. Thank
Yay,
you.
absolutely. And thank you all for listening in to another episode of Sabbath on the Land. Wherever you are, whatever your day brings, I hope you get a chance to take a nice deep breath of clean air and a little bit of time outside. So thank you so much.
Bye.